many here have ever gotten a name, a nickname, a title? Maybe when you were growing up. Maybe something happened and you were labeled. And unfortunately, no matter how hard you tried through school to shake that label or that nickname, nothing changed. People still teased you, still harassed you with that name. Well, I can actually relate to this. I know it's kind of odd. For being one of the more popular kids at school, I was teased unmercifully all through school. Now they call it bullying. Back then, it was called building character. Maybe you can relate. Well, if you can, then you can kind of understand Thomas's dilemma. Thomas gets a really bad rap. Did you notice that when we read the scriptures, it said when Jesus first appeared, now we talked about this last week, he had told the disciples before he died, I will meet you in Galilee. When he arose, he told the women, go and tell the disciples, I will meet you in Galilee. And yet where were the disciples? They were hiding up in the upper room for fear that the Jews would come and drag them away and kill them. That one person went to Galilee. Now, Jesus could have sat in Galilee twiddling his thumbs, but he didn't do that, did he? Instead, he just appeared in front of them in the upper room. He appeared to all of them except one person. Now, we don't know why Thomas was not there. Thomas could have been going out to get something to eat for the rest of the group. Maybe Thomas was so racked with grief, frustration, and confusion that he just couldn't bear it anymore, and he needed some time to think. We don't know why Thomas wasn't there. But when Jesus comes and he shows himself to the disciples, it doesn't say that they immediately believed it was because they saw him, right? He immediately showed them his hands and his side. Kind of like that egg trick we did. When Thomas comes back, they're so overjoyed and they're telling Jesus, or they're telling Thomas, we just saw Jesus. Can you understand where Thomas was coming from? Especially if he needed some time to think. Because things had not turned out the way that they thought. Jesus didn't come in riding on that white horse. He came in on a donkey, and that's where it stopped, as far as taking the throne in their eyes. Nothing had ended the way that they thought it would, even though Jesus had told them time and time what was going to happen. He's distraught. And he says, I'd like to believe. That's just too wild of a tale for me to grasp. Now, what I want to tell you a little bit about Thomas that you probably have not heard from most sermons is this is a man who in John 11:16 was the first one to say, then let us go, he's talking about to Jerusalem, so that we can die with him. Does that sound like words from a doubter? No. And in fact, in John 14:5, it was Thomas who came to Jesus questioning the mind of, how do we know the way to heaven? And Jesus says, I am the truth, the way, the life. Thomas was probing. Thomas was wanting to know. Thomas was willing to give his life for Jesus. But this seemed like maybe just a little too much. See, Thomas represents the kind of mind which gradually unfolds by searching, by seeking, by inquiring, by discovering. The kind of mind which seeks out the truth that it may believe. His character, his whole personality, what makes up Thomas is so that he can't believe just on hearsay from those around. He needs proof. He needs evidence. He needs to make sure that it makes 100% sense to him. So it solidifies his conviction. Because he says to the disciples, I was there. I saw him die. I saw him crucified. I really want to believe, but help my unbelief. He's probably questioning, why did Jesus leave us all behind? What are we going to do? As I was reading the scripture again this morning, another thing popped into my mind. When the disciples told Thomas, we've just seen Jesus, does it say that Jesus came back later that night to Thomas? No. How much time elapsed before Thomas got to see Jesus? It says a whole nother week. I may want to give Thomas a hard time, but if he's wanting to believe, if he's trying really hard to believe, but he's going, I just really need to see it, and then one day goes by, 2 days goes by, 3 days goes by, 4 days goes by. What do you think was going through his mind? Oh man, I really want to believe, but I didn't see it the first time, and I still haven't seen it. But it says a week later, then Jesus stands before him. It is an interesting story that gives Thomas this infamous nickname. But it's the same story that has Thomas making the earth-shattering confession that we just read in John 20, verse 28. When he sees Jesus, he says, my Lord and my God. I don't know if you realize this. He doesn't call him teacher. He doesn't call him master. He doesn't call him Messiah or just Lord. He calls him my God. This is the only place where Jesus is called God without any qualification. It is uttered with complete conviction as of recognizing the fact. You are my Lord and my God. Does that sound like words of a doubter? No. Jesus replies, because you've seen me, you believe. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. See, Jesus was not punishing or chastising Thomas for still not believing and needing that proof. He met Thomas right where he was at. And he gave him what he requested, right? He said, here you go. Here are my hands. Here are my side. And Thomas was probably immediately going, like Nathanael did that day when Jesus said, I saw you under the tree. Wait a minute, how did you know I said that? He gave him what he needed at the time. But then he sends this comment as a message to us. Not so much to Thomas, because he knows that it'll be for all of us who will not have that opportunity to actually see physically with our eyes Jesus' hands, his feet, and his side. We can't be like Thomas and a week later see Jesus physically. We have to go on faith that those saw him and that it's true and that it's just and that it's right. The entire Gospel of John is not written for historical facts, but so we might believe. Everything that John tells about in the Gospel is so that we can believe that Jesus did this, so we can believe that he came as God's Son, so that we can believe that he gave up the sacrifice to unite us with God one day, so that way we can believe and say like Thomas, my Lord and my God. Jesus is constantly showing us through the scriptures various levels of faith. From the simple faith, I believe. I don't need to have evidence. I just believe. To those who, I believe, but I keep needing little assurances along the way. To those who, I need evidence. I have to see it to believe it. But no matter how we get there, the end result is the same. Belief and faith in the one true Savior that came into this world to save sinners through his death and resurrection is really what it's all about. The best part about Thomas that most people do not know, Thomas, the doubter, went out and immediately, without doubt, was on fire and passion. And with that unwavering faith and belief, he started the very first church in Ethiopia. The other disciples were out proclaiming the gospel, but it was Thomas who started the first church. And that's actually recorded. And while the other disciples were traveling and spreading the good news, Thomas was already laying the foundation and establishing the roots for generations to come. In India, and I'm going to try to mention the name because I can't, but in AD 52, he baptized several people. So he started the church in Ethiopia. Now he's in India. And he's baptizing. And he's bringing people to the Lord. And he's founding what today are known as St. Thomas Christians in Nazareth. In 1258, some of the relics were actually brought to Italy. He spent most of his time in India converting the Brahmins. Now, for those of you, a little trivia, do you know who the Brahmins are? They would be the Hindus. The Hindus believe in Brahman. So here he's ministering to them. He's converting all these people for Christ. What did I say Thomas said in John 11? He said, as they marched into Jerusalem, "Then let us go that we may die with him." And such fitting words for a devoted, undoubting disciple, because it was those very Hindus that he was preaching to that killed him. This is a message of salvation and forgiveness. Thomas got it. He really got it. He just had to be 100% sure. He was willing to give his life for Christ, but he wanted to make sure that what he thought was right. How about you? Are you a little bit like that? Are you willing to be passionate and forthright so long as you know for sure? Now, maybe you're at a place right now where, like Thomas was at Easter, you're feeling a little abandoned by God. Things did not work out the way you had planned. Things are not going the way that you thought they would go. Things have been shaken up a lot. And you're wanting to believe, you're wanting to hang on to that, but it's making it really, really hard. Maybe do you feel that your prayers are falling on deaf ears? Remember, Thomas said, "I want to believe, but I got to see it." And how many days passed until God answered that prayer? So many of us find ourselves stuck in that midway of the 7 days. We've been praying, but we haven't seen the results yet in the time frame that we want or in the way that we want. And it's very easy for our faith and our belief to be shaken. Maybe you found yourself this week in a place where you're just tied up emotionally. Now the disciples, even though they saw Jesus right away, they were full of grief. They couldn't have been any more of an emotional knotted mess if they wanted to. And they see Jesus, and so now their grief has gone to joy. But then he disappears. And they don't see him for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. You notice during the whole week, though, not one of them still said, "Hey, maybe he's in Galilee." Sometimes God tells us exactly what we need to know, to do exactly what we need to do. And yet, do we do it? Do we always get it? We'll see next week that they eventually get it after about 2 weeks. They finally get to Galilee. The thing that we can take from Thomas is when we don't get it, when we find ourselves stuck in the middle of that week, wondering, wanting to believe, but we can't. That's why it's written down in the scriptures. John wanted us to know that we're all going to find ourselves in that point at some point in our life. And that Thomas got it. He found it. Jesus came to him. Jesus gave him what he asked for. And that he'll do the same for each and every one of you. If Thomas were here today, he would speak to the doubters. To those of us who have seen our hopes, our dreams destroyed, Thomas would tell his story of how Jesus' life had intercepted his own. And he would tell us of his fears, his questions, his doubts. But then with a radiant smile and a joyful face, he would recount his joy at seeing and knowing Jesus himself. And he would say, I believe. I believe. I would give my life for Christ because he is my Lord and my God. Can you say, without a doubt, that Jesus is your Lord and your God?